If you went back to the middle of the 20th century, the very idea of China building its own advanced jet aircraft would have seemed, well, like a distant dream. At the time, the nation had no domestic jet industry to even speak of. And yet what happened over the next 70 years was one of the most incredible technological journeys in modern history. This is the story of how an air force was built from the ground up, a journey from reverse engineering Soviet designs to creating some of the most advanced stealth fighters on the entire planet. So that's really the central question we're going to explore here. How do you build a modern air force from absolutely nothing? See, it's not just about bolting planes together. It's about gaining knowledge, mastering incredibly complex industrial processes, and ultimately learning how to innovate on your own. The story of China's jet aircraft gives us a fascinating case study, a step-by-step roadmap of this huge undertaking. Every great journey has to start somewhere. For China's aviation industry, that first step was guided by its ally at the time, the Soviet Union. The foundation for all its future air power wouldn't be built with original designs, not yet. It would be built by learning from some of the most iconic jets of the early Cold War. And it all started right here, with the Shenyang J-5. This jet, based directly on the formidable Soviet MiG-17, was China's very first jet fighter produced at home. The goal here wasn't innovation, it was absorption. This was all about learning the absolute fundamentals. How do you shape metal correctly? How do you assemble these complex engines? And how do you get a jet safely into the sky? This aircraft literally became the classroom for an entire generation of engineers. The key to this whole first phase was a concept called licensed production. And this wasn't about just getting a finished plane in a crate. No, it was about receiving the blueprints, the specialized tools, and the training to build it yourself. This transfer of knowledge was the absolute critical first step. It established the industrial foundation for everything that was going to come later. It was the seed from which a massive domestic industry would eventually grow. So building on that very first lesson came the Shenyang J-6. This was the Chinese version of the supersonic MiG-19. And if the J-5 was all about learning, the J-6 was about mastering production on a massive scale. Literally thousands of these jets were built, and they became the undisputed backbone of the Chinese Air Force for decades. It was simple, it was rugged, and it was an effective fighter that really defined an entire era. The next step, well, this is where you start to see subtle hints of the future. The Shenyang J-7, based on the legendary MiG-21, was more than just another copy. While it started out as a licensed build, its simple, tough airframe turned out to be incredibly adaptable. And that's why the J-7 platform would end up serving for decades as a testbed for China's own upgrades and modifications. It really became the crucial bridge between just copying and starting to adapt. Okay, so you've mastered the art of building another nation's designs. The next logical step, right, is to start changing them. This period marked a really crucial shift in thinking, from simply replicating to actively modifying and adapting technology to meet China's own specific needs. But it wasn't just about fighters. The Harbin H-5, which came from the Soviet Il-28, introduced a whole new dimension: jet-powered strike capability. See, a bomber requires a completely different skill set. Things like long-range navigation, complex targeting systems, and coordinating a multi-person crew. These were all vital experiences for an Air Force that was starting to mature. And this plane right here perfectly illustrates that growing confidence. The Nanchang Q-5 was a landmark aircraft. Now, its rear half was based on the J-6, but its redesigned forward section, with those side air intakes and an internal bomb bay, that was a uniquely Chinese innovation. It wasn't a copy of any Soviet plane. It was a dedicated ground attack aircraft, and it proved that Chinese engineers were finally ready to forge their own path. The next challenge was the greatest one yet: to move beyond just modifying planes and to create entirely new indigenous aircraft from a clean sheet of paper. This meant developing not just the airframes, but the engines, the radars, the weapons systems. A truly monumental task. You can see this path to independence brilliantly just by looking back at the old J-7. If you compare the designs, you can see that later versions like the J-7E and J-7G were radically different from that original MiG-21. Chinese engineers completely redesigned the wings for better maneuverability and fitted them with their own domestic avionics. They were using a familiar platform to master the art of independent modernization. Then came this, an ambitious leap. The Shenyang J-8 was China's first attempt at a completely original domestic interceptor designed to fly high and fast. Now, the project was plagued with challenges, limited by the engines and radar they had at the time, but it was an invaluable step. The tough lessons they learned about things like systems integration and advanced aerodynamics on the J-8 were crucial for every single aircraft that followed. So by the turn of the millennium, decades of learning, adapting, and independent effort were about to pay off in a spectacular way. The next generation of aircraft wouldn't just be an improvement, it would be a quantum leap that would put China's aviation industry firmly on the global stage. All the pieces were finally in place. The accumulated knowledge, the industrial capacity, the national ambition, it was all converging. The era of playing catch-up was coming to an end, and what came next was going to surprise the world. And here it is, the game changer, the Chengdu J-10. This wasn't an evolution, it was a revolution. It had advanced fly-by-wire controls, which basically means computers are helping the pilot fly, allowing for incredible agility that would be impossible for a human alone. You combine that with a modern glass cockpit and true multi-role capability, and the J-10 was the first Chinese fighter that could genuinely be compared to its Western contemporaries like the F-16. This was the signal of a brand new era. At the same time, China kept learning from the best. The Shenyang J-11 started out as a licensed production of Russia's powerful Su-27 heavy fighter, and this project was instrumental. It allowed the industry to master the complex manufacturing techniques needed for a large, modern airframe. In effect, it bridged the final technology gap to the top tier. So, with a modern fourth-generation fighter in service, the next frontier was already in sight: stealth. After watching the profound impact of stealth aircraft in conflicts during the 1990s, it became clear that being hard to detect was the future. This is really the pinnacle of aerospace engineering, and succeeding would mean joining a very, very exclusive club of global powers. This quote perfectly captures that shift in philosophy. Superiority in the air was no longer just about who was fastest or most maneuverable. The crucial advantage now lay in information and invisibility, seeing your opponent long before they could ever see you. And this is China's answer, the Chengdu J-20. It's a large, powerful, twin-engine stealth fighter designed for long-range interception and precision strikes. Its appearance announced China's arrival as only the third nation in the world to independently develop and fly its very own stealth combat aircraft. The technological journey from that little J-5 all the way to the J-20 was now complete. But here's the thing. Developing a cutting-edge fighter like the J-20 is only half the battle. A modern air force is a complex ecosystem. To be truly effective, it needs a whole fleet of support aircraft, the eyes, the ears, and the logistical muscle that allow those fighters to dominate the battle space. Just take a look at these specialized aircraft. Planes like the KJ-200 and KJ-500 carry these massive radar domes on their backs. They're the eyes in the sky, what we call airborne early warning and control platforms. They patrol at high altitude, detecting threats from hundreds of miles away. But more importantly, they act as flying command posts, giving a complete picture of the battlefield and directing friendly fighters to their targets. They're a critical force multiplier that makes every fighter in the sky immensely more effective. And finally, to be a global force, you need global reach. The Xi'an Y-20 is China's first heavy strategic transport jet developed at home. This massive aircraft allows the Air Force to move troops, tanks, and even humanitarian supplies across entire continents. It provides the logistical independence to project influence and respond to crises far from home, a capability that, for a long time, was completely unimaginable. So we've traced the full 70-year arc, from licensed copies all the way to world-class original designs. It was a climb from the industrial floor to the absolute cutting edge of aerospace. But this journey is far from over, which leaves us with the ultimate question. Having mastered the present, what does the future of Chinese air power hold?